down those cards.
Fortune teller!
Cards mean different things at different times.
Do you know anything about tarot cards?
Oh, a crystal ball.
Gather around, children.
Listen to the mystic.
Journey.
Podcast.
I'm no mystic.
Welcome to the Mystic Fool's Journey podcast. I'm Anna, and this is Ruth. Howdy. This is a tarot occult history bi-weekly podcast. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the history of tarot. We're talking origin stories, popular myths, and answering questions like, what the heck is a tarot birth card? Ruth, school us all. Let's dive in.
I am so excited. Birth cards are my favorite thing in tarot to talk about. I'm so excited to talk about it. Do you know about them?
I know what my cards are from the online calculators. I don't think I've deep dove into how people use them or what how people are, how they should appear or be used in readings, that kind of thing. But I know what they are, and I know what the cards mean generally.
Yeah. So it's probably the number one thing I do in tarot. I'm all about my birth card. It was the very first thing I ever learned about in tarot. My very first tarot card reading was by my uncle, and he said, okay, before we get started, we have to figure out your birth card in case it pops up in a reading. And I was like, oh, sick. That's sweet. So that was the very first thing I ever learned in tarot. We did the calculations, and he told me that my birth cards were Justice and the High Priestess, which I'm pretty happy about.
Yeah, those are dope.
What are your cards, Anna?
I'm the Star and Strength.
Good ones. It's so fun.
I'm super stoked on the Star. Yeah, it's super fun. I like the Star because I like to take naps and rejuvenate. Strength seems exhausting, but yes, I have it. It is one of my main ones.
Okay, so before we get too excited here, let's just cover what a birth card is, because surprisingly, a lot of people have never heard of them before, which is so sad to me. Everybody should know. It should be written on your birth certificate.
Oh my God, that would be the next thing we include on legal certificates is your tarot card.
Yeah, along with your zodiac sign.
Yeah.
Your big 3 and then your tarot birth card. Why not? Honestly, parents should be able to include anything they want on their birth certificate, and I want to include that on my kids'.
You can write it in at least. Get a little Sharpie.
So a birth card is the card that is tied to the numbers in your birth date. And this card represents who you are, what you need to know in life, and some lessons you might learn. They point to different facets of ourselves, such as strengths, lesson to learn, and goals to aspire to. Does that kind of make sense?
Okay, yeah, for sure. I definitely need to learn to sleep more.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the next question is probably, how do you find out your tarot birth card?
Oh, yeah.
And this is going to be a little confusing to explain, but just hang with me. You add all the numbers in your birth date to get one number, and that's going to be a big number. And then you reduce that number down to a number under 21. And then you add those two numbers, say you got 12, you add 1 and 2 to get 3, and that's your second number. So you should have 2 numbers, but there are some special people that have 3 numbers. So this is super confusing to say out loud. And I'm sure nobody understood what I just said, but just Google tarot birth card calculator, and you'll find calculators online that will do this for you. So you don't have to math it yourself. Don't get confused or thrown off just by how I explained it. Just go online and Google it.
Just know that it's kind of like numerology with your birth date and associations with tarot cards.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of people are basically cool, I found my birth card. What do I do with this information now? So think of your birth cards as basically your zodiac sign, but for tarot. You can use this as a tool for self-reflection and find the qualities of the cards that you identify with. And that's probably the most important part of this birth card thing. It's going through the card meanings, because we all know that there's multiple, and figure out what components of the card you identify with most. And then you can use this as kind of a beginning starting place for self-awareness and self-knowledge.
Yeah, I really like the analogy of the zodiac sign. It's for tarot. That makes it super accessible to think of it. Because obviously there's stuff about zodiac signs where I'm I do not identify with that thing. And same thing with some of these birth cards where I'm I don't know if I'm feeling that. But who knows? Maybe that's my lesson to learn.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I really it's really interesting to me because I think I'm curious to know if you've done readings where like you've pulled out your birth card or someone else's and like how you've used it as like, have you ever used it for like the center of a reading, or how do you treat it when it pops up for someone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So you can do whatever you want, but my personal favorite thing is when I'm doing a tarot reading and my birth card pops up in the reading. That's like friggin' gives me butterflies in my guts. And I basically like throw my whole spread out the window and make that card represent myself in the reading. So like even if it's in the place of like what to look for in the future, like I center that, section of the reading of the spread around myself at that point.
That's super cool.
Because you can kind of, jive and find yourself and qualities of yourself in any of the cards. I think, we all carry qualities that the cards carry, but having one set card that you're like, this always represents myself is a really nice, like, and very rare to have such a constant in tarot. It's my favorite part of, figuring out my birth card. It's kind of like nailing down at least one constant in readings for me.
Oh, yeah. And then, like, just the probability of that card showing up is wild, where you're just like, there's 78 other cards. Why do you keep getting that one? So that is fun. I think people should probably try kind of what you do, which is, like, reordering the cards when something is, like, pops up. Because, like, obviously, if you are starting to respond to this card and you're like, okay, my brain is telling me, like, I got some unconscious thoughts around this. I'm gonna rearrange my cards. Like, I think it's time because it might like help you reflect on like what would be the better way to go about whatever it is you're asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And like once you figure out what your two or if you're one of those rare 3 card persons, once you figure out what those are, like the first step you should do before just like jumping into readings with it would be to like take the cards and look at them just next to each other in their order and see how they interact with each other. Practice linking just those 2 tarot cards to start. Like, for example, mine are Justice and the High Priestess, which are both, pretty formal cards. They're both seated in thrones and facing forward, and they're both crowned and robed super ceremoniously, and they have pillars and, like, veils, which represents, like, gateways into the unknown. And then Justice has, like, the swords and scales, which is, like, sharp and demanding. And then the High Priestess has, like, the scrolls and the cross, which means, like, deep and permissive. You kind of look at the similarities and the differences in the cards and how, like, they might overlap and like where the Venn diagram with those cards are so that you can just gain more information about, when those 2 cards do pop up in your readings, how you can kind of, apply that knowledge to the spread.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah. Because thinking about my 2 cards, the Star and Strength, like they are very different in the sense that like the Star is overall like a very like calming, healing, regenerative, restorative. And then Strength is like loud. It's like, it is bright. It is like, it's like in your face and you're just like both looking at like where they overlap, but then also looking at, oh, how do they challenge each other? Like, what about them is different? And like, maybe that's like, oh, you struggle with one or the other, or like you lean too heavily on one and maybe you should bring in a little bit more of the other. It's really interesting.
Yeah, like, and there's some pretty crazy pairings out there. Like, I'm super jealous of the people, because one of the pairings is the Devils and the Lovers.
I love that one. It's so cool.
Yeah, isn't it so funny? And like when you look at those 2 cards next to each other, like the structure is absolutely identical. You kind of have one guy's like a devil in the thing, and then there's the angel, but there's 2 people up ahead, but the 2 people are chained together over here, but they're like lovers over here. So they're like set up identical, but they mean such different things.
Mm-hmm. It's super cool.
Like one's very self-centered, like self-determined and like expressive and self-important. And then the other one's very, like, relationship-oriented, too. Like, I like mine, too, because they're fairly, like, in line with each other, like, meanings-wise.
You're like, these line up.
At least you can interpret them kind of as the same thing.
Right.
But Devil and the Lovers, you're like, oh, shit, what do I do?
There might be some strife up ahead, or you gotta, figure out some things.
Yeah, I think the other one is like the Tower and the Chariot. It's like, dude, what have you gone through in life? Tell me your life story. When I find out that's their birth card, I'm like, dude, tell me everything.
Yeah, those are just 2 very strong cards. And I mean, like, you can look at the Tower in a positive light, but, obviously most people's first impressions of the Tower are not so positive. But yeah, it's just like, that's a lot of like change energy. Like, we are going to change. We are going to knock things down. We're going to move forward. And like, I'm getting tired just talking about it.
Yeah, and like they're both centered around action. It's just like the Tower is like chaotic action, and like unplanned for action, and the Chariot could be considered like super like meticulous and planned out action.
Yeah, like productive action.
Yeah, exactly. But it's truly a opposites in that pairing as well. But this is also my favorite party trick.
Love that.
I told earlier that the first thing I ever learned about tarot was my birth cards, because I love bringing my deck to like parties and stuff so I can give readings to everybody, like specifically after everybody's had a few, and I don't have to worry about like, you know, misinterpreting anything or doing anything too exact. Everybody's just kind of down to clown at this point. And so somebody will sit down in front of me, and the first thing we do is calculating their birth card. And I think if anybody else has ever read at parties before, you know that like the interested group kind of all gathers around and watches the readings go down. Like inevitably the birth card pops up in that person's reading or in another person's reading, and the whole crowd goes crazy like, oh shit, that's the birth card, that's me. Or, oh, that's my birth card in your reading right now. It's like definitely like a gateway drug into tarot. It's like the best way. If you have a group of friends that you want to get into tarot, go to a party, tell everybody their birth cards, and do readings for them, because it's the most tangible way to get people into tarot. People love talking about themselves.
Oh, yeah. Anything that can make it more personal. I think, and that's just like with life, but it's kind of like zodiac signs, Myers-Briggs personality quizzes, like anything that you're like either gives you insight into who you are or like confirms things that you already think about yourself, that type of stuff. It's just like, this is a way to make tarot less scary and way more personable and welcoming, to be like, hey, it's your birth card. See, it's a thing. And then people are just like, yeah, let's watch and read. Let's do this.
And it's also just like a tangible piece of knowledge that people can walk away with. Like sometimes the tarot people tend to forget their readings or, you know, chalk it up to hullabaloo. But at least this is like something they can take along with themselves, you know, as a certain fact.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also one of those, like, the more people know about something that they previously didn't know anything about, the less spooky that thing is. So, you know, this is just that like baby step into like, hey, once you know something and like gather that knowledge and information, it's probably not as spooky as what you think. Yeah, so we've got birth cards. I've heard a little bit about soul and personality cards. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or have you like, I don't know, done anything with those? Know what they are?
I've heard a lot about those. It's basically the same kind of gist. You know, they're basically kind of the same thing. So some people call birth cards soul and personality cards. And this method is used by Mary Greer, who's like a badass tarot historian. You should look her up. And instead of birth cards, she refers to the pairs as personality and soul cards, since you have 2 or sometimes 3 cards. People use this method to further distinguish each card's roles. So personality cards represent what we have entered this lifetime to learn, while soul cards represent what our soul purpose is across multiple lifetimes. So your first birth card is your personality card, so mine would be Justice, and then the second card is your soul card, so mine would be High Priestess. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I'll have to look up what my first card, I guess my first card is Star then? I don't know. I'll have to double check. And my second card.
Yeah, it goes by the number.
Okay, cool. Then I think my personality is Star and my soul is Strength. Super cool. There's plenty of guides online for sure about this. So if like hearing about it is confusing, obviously, like they usually come with the calculators, some like guides on which card is which.
Yeah, so if your personality card is Star, then you might have like entered this lifetime to learn to be like optimistic and relaxed and take a lot of naps and that sort of thing.
We talking about naps a lot. I am ready for a good nap at all times.
Naps are the hidden meaning of the Star card.
It's true. That's actually what it's about. Go take a nap, kid.
Yeah, and then so if your soul card is your strength card, then the purpose that you have to learn across all of your many lifetimes is to be like more like demanding and vigilant and strong.
Oh God, that sounds exhausting. No wonder it's paired with the Star card. It's like, hey, take naps, but get work done.
Yeah, so no matter how you interact with your tarot birth card, becoming familiar with it and calling on it for grounding knowledge and like self-awareness is a super awesome tool to have in your tarot arsenal.
Super fun.
Okay, so Anna, some people are super into knowing other people's zodiac signs, but I'm way more into knowing people's tarot birth cards. Everyone's like, oh, you're such a Scorpio, blah, blah, blah. But when someone tells me their birth card is like the Tower, I'm like, tell me everything. What's up with your life? Are you okay? Like, what's going on? And then if somebody is like, oh, what are your birth cards? I don't know. I'm like, let me change your life right now and tell you your birth cards. So if you know what your tarot birth card is, drop a comment and share below.
Yes, that please share. We might do little short episodes on each of the pairings of the cards, just for funsies. Yeah. So follow along. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and if you're a fan of the podcast, we would love for you to leave these reviews so we can find new fans and learn more about super cool tarot history and birth cards and the like. So tell your friends and follow on all socials. Our handles are Sweet Death Inc. and Mystic Fool Tarot on all platforms. See you later.
See ya.